ever since then, I've been telling stories about my dad. And I want to tell the story about my dad today, about dreams. And the things I've learned from my dad, as all of us have, right? Our parents learn and teach us great things, and I think of my little son, I'm thinking, oh man, he's in trouble. Because I don't know what I'm going to teach him, and I certainly won't quite do it like my dad did. But my dad had a huge dream. When he was a young boy, he grew up on a farm outside Ottawa, and he grew up during the Depression. So as you can imagine, in a small farm in the backwoods of Quebec, there was not a whole lot of money going around. And Dad loved music, absolutely loved music, and that's something I got from him. And he would listen to Wilf Carter, and he would listen to all these old cowboy singers, Hank Snow and Gene Autry. And the one thing about all of them is they had Martin guitars. Now those of us that know guitars know Martins are like they're like the Cadillac or the Porsche of guitars. So for a poor farm kid growing up and seeing these people playing Martins, I'm thinking, man, someday I'm gonna have a Martin. Well, it'd be like saying someday I'm gonna go plant a garden on the moon. It just wouldn't happen. It would be so out of the realm of possibility. Well, Dad moved to the city, and he got a job, and he got money. But he also got married. And then after he got married, he had Ken. And then he had me, Dave. And then he had Phil. And then they had Gord. And then they had Grant. And then they had Rob. And then they had Julie. And then they had Teresa. And then they had Anne. And by now, I was moved out of the house. They had Joe. 10 kids. And so, the dream for buying this beautiful, expensive guitar had to get put on hold. But when we were kids, Dad would take whatever guitar he could, and he'd sing to us, and he'd play us songs. But he always had to go back to work, because work was going to put food on the table. So we'd go back to work, but the dream never died. And years later, it all happened. And I remember he'd talk about it the way people would talk about Gretzky, or the way people would talk about something huge, and he came home. And every year I tell you about something my dad taught me, about the value of dreams, about the value of doing things just a bit at a time. And it might take 5 years, it might take 50 years, but if you work at it and you stick with it, and that dream is always in your head, then it'll happen. Well, my dad worked on construction his whole life, and still does. He's going to a job today, because he still does. But so excited for this moment. It's the first time I've ever been able to say this. For his second career, he started at 65 years old. And that was just a few years ago. Ladies and gentlemen, my dad is going to come up and tell you a story and sing a song on his Martin guitar. Come on, Dad.
I taught him everything he knows, and he still knows nothing. I left the farm up in Quebec, 1953. You call it a farm, I bet the only thing my dad raised on it was his voice. Went to the big city of Ottawa, and I got a job working on the CPR Railroad, the extra gang. I worked there for a couple of months, and my dream of being a millionaire came to an abrupt end. Somebody came with more seniority and bumped me. I did a few little jobs, this and that. Eventually I met a man about my dad's age. And he said he was a plastering contractor. And he told me he'd hire me to mix mud for him for 60 cents an hour. And so I did. Started working. One night I had to bring something over to his house. I was living with my brother Joe and his wife Maddie in a second floor apartment in this big old brick house. Joe had been married for a year or so and he was more accustomed to the city than I was. And he says, you know, Bob, when you go to somebody's house in the city, you gotta ring the doorbell. I said, what's the doorbell? Well, he said, you know, in the middle of the door when you're coming in, there's a little handle there and you turn it. That rings a bell and then the people know you at the door. They didn't have a doorbell back in the shack where I was raised. They hardly had a door, let alone a doorbell. So I left, and in the middle of winter it was dark, and I found the street, Oxford Street. I went up to number 18 Oxford, and I walked past the front door. It was a fairly new house. I think that thing's going down here all the time. And I walked past the door, and I couldn't find the bell. So I walked back and forth and I looked for that bell and I looked and I couldn't find it. There's a street with houses on both sides and it felt like there was 100 million eyes all looking down at me, walking back and forth looking for the bell. Eventually I had nerve enough up and I stole up onto the veranda. And with every inch of energy I had, I pushed that little button. I hoped it was a doorbell. The boss's wife came and let me in. She said, Alex upstairs shaving, he'll be down in a minute. So she took me in, sat me on the Chesterfield, and she went ahead out to the kitchen. Eventually I glanced out into the kitchen and I saw the most beautiful girl I had ever laid my eyes on, drying the dishes. I kind of cocked my eye at her. She cocked her eye back at me. And there we were, the both of us cockeyed. Finished my apprenticeship in 1958 and married that beautiful girl in 1960. This past November the 19th, we celebrated our 50th wedding anniversary. Thank you. And she's still the most beautiful girl I ever laid my eyes on. We had, as Dave said, we had 6 boys. 1973, I put the tent trailer on behind the station wagon and I headed across the prairie, my wife and I and the 6 boys. We landed in Edmonton and I don't know if it was the North Saskatchewan River water or what it was, but we had 4 girls in it. I built a house, and it's got 2 doorbells. I'm kind of retired now. I say I work part-time, a different part of me works every day. I do the odd little job. If your ceiling falls, let me know. I'd be glad to fix it up for you. But you know, in my spare time, I volunteer and I sing about 9 times a month at seniors' residence, the hospital in Edmonton. And I do it for 2 different reasons. The first reason is because life has been so good to me. And back something that I've got. And the next reason is because 95% of the people, like myself, that I sing to, have hearing aids and they don't hear my singing. I wrote a song a while back about me. It goes like this. I call it Just Thinking. Good sound, eh? Thinking, yes, I've been thinking about what a great life I have had with all the youngsters all sitting around me, and they all call me Dad. They had fun galore on the living room floor or on their daddy's knee. 4 little girls for mommy and a hockey team for me. Thinking how my dreams have all come true. When we started out in 1960 with wedding rings and a Studebaker car, $90 a week was what we lived on, but $90 back then went pretty far. Plastering put food on the table. Over 50 years I think I've done it all. I often thank the Lord that I was able, especially when the kids were small. Time keeps rolling on, now I get the pension. They pay me just to sit around all day. I often thank. Did you ever have a senior's moment? This little tale I told ain't no invention. And in closing, this is what I say. Thinking, yes, I've been thinking about some amazing things I saw. Like all these youngsters now sitting around me, and they all call me Grandpa. They'll fun galore on the living room floor now, ain't that just the best? Better take them home, 'cause me and Grandma need a rest. Thinking,
That's my dad, Bob Kelly. As you can tell, Dad's always in a big hurry. You know, it's funny, when he was older, I mean, he's not, he's a very young man, but as we would talk about singing and doing shows, and he'd say that I learned a lot about him, about construction. He'd come watch me, and I think, I'll just keep watching you, Dad. You just do a great job, and you're a hero of mine. That's my dad.